Today we're talking about the truth about stevia, and I'm going to talk about some of the controversies, like does stevia cause infertility, and is stevia better than other non-caloric sweeteners? And so let's start by looking at stevia. It's part of the ragweed family. We're going to come back to that because that's important to understand. It contains two active ingredients. One is called stevioside, which is roughly 250 to 300 times sweeter than typical sugar or sucrose. It also has a compound called Reb-A, which is 350 to 400 times sweeter than sucrose. So very, very sweet, doesn't have any calories. It's a natural herb that you can grow. In fact, in my backyard at my old home, I actually grew stevia leaf, right? And so it was great. I was able to pick the leaf and chew on it and eat it. And it grows in North America. Native Americans have grown it. It's been growing for thousands of years. And so it is a natural herb. Of course, it's processed into components where you have stevia extracts that people use as a non-caloric sweetening agent. When we look at studies that look at how it impacts our blood sugar and insulin levels in comparison to sugar, as well as in comparison to other non-caloric sweeteners, things like aspartame and sucralose, it's been shown that individuals that are consuming stevia on average have lower blood sugar levels and lower levels of insulin than individuals that are consuming these other non-caloric sweeteners like aspartame, sucralose, otherwise known as NutraSweet, that's aspartame, and then Splenda is known as, sucralose is known as Splenda, right? So those are kind of the trade names. And then also, of course, lower blood sugar and insulin levels than sugar, which is what you would assume. But when it comes to the non-caloric artificial sweeteners, the aspartame and the Splenda, a lot of people think those don't impact your blood sugar or insulin levels, but they actually do. But stevia has been shown not to. Now, that may not be the case with everybody, but as an average in these studies, it's been shown to lower blood sugar, have improvements in insulin sensitivity for individuals that are taking stevia. Also, some of the other great benefits, it actually improves blood vessel health. So they have better blood pressure and better energy levels after meals. And so great benefits as far as that goes. And then it's also been shown to have immunomodulatory benefits, meaning that it helps balance the immune system, helps reduce inflammation. A few studies have actually shown that it helps improve or actually helps to reduce the amount of Borrelia Lyme bacteria. So when we talk about Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi is one of the main bacterial infections in the bloodstream. Stevia leaf has been shown to inhibit the growth and replication process of Borrelia. So some promising stuff there. We really need more research to understand all the benefits of stevia. But I mentioned how there's a percentage of people that may not respond well to it, and that's because it's part of the ragweed family. And there's about 3% of the population that has an allergy or sensitivity to ragweed. And it may be even larger. It's like 3 to 5% that have either an allergy or sensitivity. And so for those individuals, when they consume things that are in that family, such as stevia, they notice that they have more inflammation in their body. They don't feel as good. That may throw off their blood sugar, may actually cause an increase in blood pressure, and may cause more arterial stiffness and poor function in the endothelial lining of the blood vessels. So they may get all the opposite effects of the vast majority of people that will benefit from stevia. So if you're somebody that has not responded well, you don't feel good when you consume stevia, that may be why. It may be because it's in the ragweed family and you have an allergy or a sensitivity, a delayed sensitivity to things in the ragweed family. So that's something to look out for. Okay, now, there's big controversy in the natural health world about stevia and infertility. So let's really jump on that. So the Mato Grosso Indians in Paraguay would drink stevia leaf tea, and according to them, in their culture, they would drink extra amounts, like a lot of stevia leaf tea if they wanted to reduce fertility for women, right? So if women didn't want to have any more babies, they would drink a lot of that. And so based on that, anecdotal story of that tribe, I think it is wise that we actually test, does stevia cause infertility? And that was first done by Professor Kruk, 1968 at Purdue University. And he showed that very high amounts, he gave rats very high amounts of stevia thousands of times higher than what you would normally consume on a you know, for when it's adjusted for weight for a human, showed infertility, right? That they had less offspring than the control group that did not have high amounts of stevia consumption. So that was the original study. Since then, there have been a whole bunch of other studies that have not shown, that have not been able to replicate the findings in that study until 1991. And that is where Professor Mauro Alvarez out of Brazil, he gave high amounts of stevia to female mice and showed that they were less fertile. And so those are the only two studies actually that have ever shown it. They're both animal studies done on rats. Other studies that have tried to reproduce those results have not shown any sort of change in fertility levels. And there's a lot of criticisms. When you really look at these studies, a lot of criticisms in how both Professor Kruk and Professor Mauro Alvarez's studies had their initial findings. And so very important to understand, Professor Kruk actually, he said, I think it was because of toxicity levels. I gave them so much that it was probably a toxic effect. And when it comes to almost any herb, any sort of natural compound, you can take too much, right? I mean, things like even like magnesium, if you take too much, you get loose stools, right? You don't feel good. You can get nausea, vomiting. So almost any sort of nutrient or any sort of plant compound there can be a toxic dose. That's what Professor Kruk's and Professor Alvarez's hypothesis was as they looked at the study and the other studies. Now, 1999, a Thailand study, they looked at hamsters. They gave them 2,500 milligrams a day of stevia, or roughly the equivalent of what a human would consume as 2,500 milligrams a day of stevia. Now, the average dose for Americans, roughly about 2 milligrams, right? If you get 10 milligrams in a day, that's a lot of stevia that you consume. So you would never get 2,500 milligrams in a day. And even at that level, they actually didn't show any infertility effects on the hamsters. So even at a super high level. So perhaps the toxicity level for rats different than the toxicity level for hamsters, right? And maybe hamsters have a better buffering system where they don't have quite the same toxic effects at a high dose that rats do. So we don't fully understand that. But another study, 2008 Journal of Endocrinology and Reproduction, volume 12, they looked again at rats and they found no adverse effects when they were doing, even at higher doses, or at least human higher doses, they showed no adverse effects. And so there's been no human studies that have shown infertility effects. So it really just comes from what the Mato Grosso Indians did with stevia leaf tea, and then two studies, right? 1968, 1991 studies. And because of those studies, the FDA has said, we can't approve stevia as a safe natural sweetener. Obviously, it's approved for sale. They just don't list it in the approved non-caloric natural, or non-caloric sweeteners. They don't call it natural, but non-caloric dietary sweeteners. And that would be where they have things like aspartame, Splenda, aspartame potassium, a lot of the things that in the natural health world we really look down on that actually have a lot of studies showing detrimental effects, adverse effects from consuming things like aspartame, Splenda, things like aspartame potassium, monosodium glutamate, things like that. There's a lot of studies showing negative effects, and yet those are approved by the FDA. The FDA is not approved stevia. They say we don't have enough studies to prove that it doesn't cause problems with fertility, with kidney issues, with a number of different issues. And so they're saying we need more studies. I recommend we get more studies, but I will tell you, just as an anecdotal effect, my wife and I, we use stevia. We used it, before we had kids. We used it while we were in the process of having children. We had no effect. It had no impact on us when it came to our fertility levels. We continue to use it. I feel great using it. So I think the general advice with this is, if you feel good using stevia, like if you feel good, you don't feel inflamed when you're using it, you feel like it doesn't increase the amount of cravings that you're having, that you feel mentally clear using it, then you can use it and enjoy it, okay? And I think that that's great. It's great to have a good natural sweetener that you can enjoy. However, if you're noticing that you have more inflammation, that you just don't feel as good, when you're consuming it, you may have a sensitivity to it or an allergy. And that's where it could cause infertility. If you're somebody that has a ragweed sensitivity or allergy, and you're consuming stevia, that may trigger autoimmunity. It may trigger more inflammation and perhaps autoimmunity for males to their sperm cells, for females to their eggs, and that could cause infertility. So the end or the conclusion of this is stevia for most people is not going to increase infertility based on the level of evidence we have today. But for a very small percentage of people that have a ragweed allergy or sensitivity, it may very well cause infertility or just increased inflammation, unwanted health effects. Usually, most of the time, if you're noticing more inflammation, like if you consume something that you're sensitive to in isolation, or if you're consuming that and you're noticing repeated bouts of inflammation where you just don't feel as good, you feel more mentally sluggish, lower energy, more pain, maybe skin issues, maybe having to clear your throat a lot after you consume this, then that's probably a good indication that you're having a sensitivity. It's driving up inflammation in your body. It's probably affecting other areas of your body outside of just where you're noticing the symptoms. And if that's the case with stevia, then you'll want to avoid it. Outside of that, if you feel good when you're consuming it, I would recommend you continue to consume it as long as, again, keeping an eye to make sure that you're not noticing any increase in inflammation, increase in cravings, lower energy, right? All these unwanted symptoms. And that's really the general advice with any sort of food that you're consuming, is to just watch and have that biofeedback of how your body's responding to it. But good news is now you know the truth about stevia and fertility. It doesn't, as a whole, cause infertility. As a whole, it is safe. As a whole, it has many great health benefits, but you have to decide for yourself how your body's responding to it. If you like this video, please share it with somebody you know and you care about, and we'll see you on a future video training. Be blessed.